3,500 years ago, deep beneath the Austrian Alps, Bronze Age miners descended into darkness. By the light of oil lamps and pine tapers, wearing tough leather and protective headwear, they climbed down timber scaffolds and hand-hewn staircases. They swung stone hammers and bronze picks, hauling their prizes to the surface in woven baskets. But they weren't mining copper or tin. They were mining salt. This white gold made chieftains rich and powerful. It helped transform Proto-Celtic culture across Europe. And it all started thousands of years earlier, when Neolithic farmers discovered something extraordinary beneath their feet. This is the story of how salt changed everything in prehistoric Europe. We take salt for granted, it's just there, on our tables in our kitchens, ready to sprinkle on literally anything. But salt, sodium chloride, is far more than seasoning. Sodium and chloride ions are fundamental to how our bodies work. Without enough salt, you get fatigue, muscle weakness. Severe deficiency is fatal. Our Paleolithic ancestors got adequate sodium from their diet, especially from meat and blood, and from certain plants. Salt concentration in soil varies by geography, with more near coastlines. It's possible hunter-gatherers made deliberate journeys to salt-rich regions, the way animals instinctively seek out salt licks. But this kind of behavior rarely leaves archaeological evidence. Salt exists in two main forms. There's seawater, obviously, but there's also halite rock salt. Massive underground deposits all over the world, remnants of ancient seas from hundreds of millions of years ago. These deposits can interact with groundwater, dissolving and emerging as natural brine springs. Mesolithic hunter-gatherers likely used these springs. There's even evidence from southeast France, worked timbers from a brine well dated to around 5700 BC, possibly forming an enclosure for solar evaporation. But everything changed when farming arrived. Around 6000 BC, the first European farmers were spreading through the Balkans, moving along river valleys, founding new settlements. These agricultural societies needed more salt. Their diets relied more on cereals than meat. Their herds needed salt supplements. And as they moved inland, away from the coast, accessible salt sources became crucial considerations when choosing where to settle. The eastern Carpathian region has many natural salt springs, thanks to underground halite deposits. And one site in Romania, Poiana Slatinai, which literally means salt spring meadow, has been called the earliest salt production site in the world. The oldest dates go back to 6000 BC. This is where we find the earliest appearance of something called briquettage. Briquettage is coarse ceramic pottery specifically made for boiling salt. You fill these pots with brine, heat them over fires to evaporate the water, and salt crystals form inside. Then you smash the pot open to get the salt cake out. Single use. Over time, this creates enormous mounds of broken pottery waste. The term briquettage was coined in 1740 by a French military engineer who noticed these mounds of brick-like material where he was working. From the Neolithic onwards, this technique spread across Europe. Different brine springs had different salt concentrations, varying by season and rainfall. The salt could be used as brine directly, poured into soups, used to preserve dairy. But to make salt crystals for transport and storage, you needed evaporation. At these early Neolithic sites, production was probably seasonal and small-scale. Salt seasoned food for people and animals. It preserved meat and processed hides. Better food storage meant communities could survive seasonal shortages. Better nutrition fueled population growth, but one site took this much further. Near Prevadia in Bulgaria sits the only large salt deposit in the region. Salt extraction has happened here for over 7,000 years. The site is called Solnitsata, the salt works. Some call it Europe's oldest town. Salt springs here were first exploited around 5500 BC. By the late Chalcolithic period, around 4500 to 4200 BC, this was a specialized salt production center. Clay ovens and ceramic pots processed brine at an industrial scale. This site was part of massive Chalcolithic trade networks, gold and copper from the Balkan Mountains, shells from the Aegean, obsidian, raw materials and finished goods flowing across hundreds of kilometers. Just 40 kilometers away is the Varna Cemetery, the oldest gold treasure in the world. The burial site of the world's first metal-working elite, buried with abundant weapons and ornaments. Solnitsata was defended. Ditches, stone walls, bastions, wooden palisades. This wasn't just a village, it was a fortified economic center. A proto-town. The population was probably only a few hundred at any time. But imagine their lives, collecting and transporting brine, cutting timber for fires, digging clay for ovens and evaporation jars. weaving bags and baskets for salt cakes, building boats to paddle their produce downriver to trade with the metallurgists of Varna. What did they believe about this substance that emerged from the earth, a gift from the gods of the underworld? Excavations continue every summer, there's still so much to uncover. Fast forward 1,000 years, we're in the Bronze Age now. Most salt still came from brine springs and coastal evaporation using brickwettage. But some places began mining halite directly, rock salt. Surface quarrying probably happened in many places, but continued mining has obliterated most ancient workings. However, we do have hints. From Transylvania and Ukraine, archaeologists found wooden troughs with holes in the bottom, dated to the Bronze Age, 16th to 9th centuries BC. One theory. They poured fresh water through these troughs onto rock salt below. The holes had wooden plugs with tiny holes and twisted cords dangling down, dissolving the halite beneath, creating weak points you could crack open. Another theory. They poured brine into the troughs and let it drip slowly onto textiles below, where salt crystals would form. Both methods have been tested. Both actually work. But proper underground mining, digging shafts and galleries, was highly skilled and dangerous. Most prehistoric mines were destroyed by later mining in the same areas, except at Hallstatt. In this famous Austrian salt region, some prehistoric mine workings survived. Mining here started around 1450 BC but intensified massively in the Iron Age. They built wooden structures underground, scaffolds, and staircases. One surviving staircase has been called the oldest wooden staircase in the world. The timber was felled in 1344 BC. It's 1.8 meters wide, 8 meters long. You can tell from the angle of the treads it was originally steeper, probably built to cross heaps of mining spoil. The high salt content preserves organic material. We found wooden tools, leather clothing, even the spruce and fir tapers they used as torches. We don't know exactly who worked down there in the flickering lamplight, but this mine was vital to the people who controlled it during the Urnfield period. We know them from thousands of Bronze Age and Iron Age burials in the area. This enormous cemetery gave its name to the Proto-Celtic Hallstatt culture, hugely important and influential across Europe. The Bronze Age saw the emergence of chiefly elites who grew powerful through control of local resources. Salt from Hallstatt and nearby Duenberg. Wealth concentrated in the hands of warlords wielding bronze and iron swords. Between around 800 and 100 BC, salt production reached unprecedented scale and sophistication across Europe. Population growth drove demand. Increasingly complex societies needed reliable food preservation and commodities for trade. Most archaeological evidence for European salt production comes from this era. In Mediterranean regions, sea salt could be evaporated by the sun alone. But in northwestern Europe, even summer wasn't hot enough. This is where antiquarians discovered great mounds of smashed brickwettage, seawater concentrated and evaporated by fire. In eastern England, these mounds of brick-coloured debris were called red hills. One of the highest concentrations was in coastal Essex. The stretch of the River Blackwater between Maldon and Mersey Island has been famous for salt production for millennia. It's still home to Maldon Sea Salt, one of the world's premier sea salt brands. The salt marshes here, through local currents and tides, through repeated inundations and evaporations, accumulated incredibly high salt concentrations. The creeks were so salty that boys from across the region came here to learn to swim. The increased buoyancy made it easier. The air and soil were so salt-rich that local orchards survived late frosts better. Sheep and cattle raised on these marshes were especially healthy and delicious. In the Iron Age, communities here produced salt seasonally. They used clay-lined pits, wooden troughs, and finally boiled brine in ceramics, creating those mounds of brickwettage, the Red Hills. Over 300 red hills are known from Essex alone. Similar sites across England, usually in estuaries, dating to the Iron Age and Roman period. The salt was traded inland to population centres where demand was highest. Different techniques at different contemporary sites suggest idiosyncratic methods passed down through families, even when sites were within view of each other. These mounds remind me of Mesolithic shell middens. On one level, just industrial waste, but on another level, monuments to work and ancestors. People who stood where you stood, did what you were doing, passed down their skills through generations. There's some evidence they saw red hills this way, possible ritual deposits, nearby burials, suggesting spiritual significance. Today, Essex's red hills have been flattened by seawalls and ploughing, but fragments of brickwettage still appear on the surface, at field edges in seawalls, eroding from muddy banks. You sometimes hear this idea that in the ancient world, salt was more valuable than gold. That was never true. This notion probably came from misunderstanding the trans-Saharan trade, where gold was plentiful and salt scarce. But salt could have enormous value in prehistory, depending on time and place. Some communities, some people grew wealthy and powerful from its production and trade. We take it for granted today. But for our ancestors, as far back as 8,000 years ago, salt had transformative power. As they transformed this substance through complex processes, salt transformed their communities, shaped their ways of life, and influenced the course of European history. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe for more videos like this. Your support genuinely helps. If you'd like to join, links are in the description. For more on prehistoric mining and stories, check out my previous videos. Thanks for watching.